Final Fantasy XI Online was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2001 and eventually ported to the PC and Xbox 360 over the following years. Being the first game to go online for the series was pretty cool for the time, and it was eventually eclipsed by Final Fantasy XIV. But outside of those who are still dedicated to playing Final Fantasy XI, either through retail, which is the official game, or on private servers, people don't really talk about this game anymore. But a little bit about me. I come from private servers, starting on Eden in 2019 before playing on Horizon when it launched in 2022. But with Horizon being stuck in the second expansion for 2 years, and most 99 servers having lots of custom content which doesn't really catch my interest, the thought crossed my mind, why not just try retail? When it went on sale, I was able to get the game and all the expansions for just $10. It's what a steal. To play the game, you have to go through the Play Online launcher, which is the official launcher for Final Fantasy XI. But why even bring this up? Because the launcher is required to play the game, and you don't have the option to skip it, which means you have to go through the CBT of logging into Play Online to actually play the game. It's also a piece of shit. There are horror stories of people getting this set up. For some people, it takes them an hour, if not days. I've even read people recommending calling customer service for help. Imagine if 14 had a launcher like that. The launcher certainly feels like it's over 20 years old. Sometimes it takes 2 clicks just to get something to work, and the window size is in 640 by 480 with no maximize option available. At least the music in the launcher is a banger. It's what you've been hearing up to this point in the video. There's actually a whole OSC for this launcher alone, and I highly recommend checking it out. This launcher is so far basically worthless, since you don't really add any of your own info into it. It just sends you to different web pages that actually do the work for you. Eventually, you have to go back to the launcher to link the account. Finally, now that we finished setting up 2 accounts for some reason, we can see past the login screen. Or so I thought we would. What do you mean that this is wrong? I copy and pasted the information correctly. Despite me choosing the option to save the password the first time, it didn't actually save. So, on Reddit to find the solution, apparently it wasn't happy with us pressing the save option the first time, so I had to go back to do it again. Since you only log into the Square Enix account and no option to log in with the Play Online itself, it feels redundant to even log in with 2 accounts. But whatever, once doing this, we can actually log in. I'm not gonna lie, once logging in, I spent half an hour just wandering through the launcher, going through the many sub-menus. I also spent a fair amount of time editing my profile, which you can add me here if you want. There's lots of cool stuff here, like old wallpapers for the launcher, and even mobile phone wallpapers, with some funky looking brick phones, old news posts from years gone by, patch notes from the game about a decade old now, and even Square Enix greeting cards, which is quite quaint. It also includes a forum for just Play Online users, but nobody was on it when I checked it out. There's a friends list, the ability to make group chats, and a built-in file manager. When I was younger, I loved going through different virtual chat rooms, and seeing how truly complete this program is was just a huge wave of nostalgia. But unfortunately, everything here is either deprecated or nobody uses. Play Online was meant to be a generic tool to connect multiplayer games and to chat with people, but now it's effectively just a Final Fantasy XI launcher, which is pretty sad. You can't even download any of the images anymore, making it lost media, sort of. Despite how unpleasant the launcher can feel, and how long it took to set up, and how most of the launcher is basically worthless, it's sort of like a time capsule for what was cool then, and I can't help but love it. And the production value is high, even for standards now, and I know I would have spent way too long on this if I played during the prime of Play Online. This warning before playing Final Fantasy XI is pretty funny. It's not even a proper terms of service, it's just a sign that says don't get addicted to crack. Don't know how helpful that'll be though. But we're not done yet. Now there's an update, spending all the time setting up Play Online just to waste some more. Lovely. Once that's done, there's another update, verifying data, whatever. Guess while we wait, we can talk about some fun facts. Play Online supported 4 games in America and 3 games exclusive to Japan. However, excluding Square Enix produced games, only 2 were actually released for the platform. Fantasy Earth, which was a 50v50 PvP game, which closed in 2022, and EverQuest 2, though EverQuest 2 only used the service in Japan, and only for about 2 years or so, before being dropped. Now the only game that uses the software is Final Fantasy XI, as they more or less ported Tetra Master to Final Fantasy XIV, effectively making this just a launcher to go into Final Fantasy XI. After waiting a second time, we can finally boot up the game and... Well, this is going to look a little better. Thanks to community support, there's ways to improve the overall gameplay experience, including HD packs, add-ons, and plugins. Now technically this is against the rules, but the dev team for 11 is like 3 people, and they only really work in maintenance mode, so I don't think they'll really care. Now this is not a tutorial on how to set things up, but I know some people will ask. I use Ashido version 4 with the lore-friendly HD pack to make the game look nicer, Remapser for HD and game maps for most places, though not all, and Moses DLL fix for stability, reshade to make the colors pop more, and a 4GB patch to make the game use more than 2. Finally, I use a handful of plugins, but the most important ones are FPS to make the game run at 60, and draw distance to extend the default draw distance, which helps with some immersion. I'm running this on a 1440p monitor, and I find setting the menu size to 1920 by 1080 is the best, so it's not too big or overblown in scaling. Now, doing these extra things are not needed, and you can play the game with just a vanilla install. It even works on a Steam Deck/Proton if you're on Linux, but these are absolutely helpful if you take the time to set them up, and as you can see, the game looks a lot nicer just from the title screen. Another thing to consider is actually the control method you'll use. The keyboard layout cannot be changed from the default settings, and I mean, don't just look at it. It has a few more commands that a controller doesn't have, which can be helpful for more sweaty things, but for a lot more casual use, playing with a controller is absolutely more convenient. Don't let how long it took to set this whole game up to be a deterrent. It is a shame that the backbone to the game itself has not been updated since the PlayStation 2 days, but once you get past the play online allegations, and make the game look nicer with the Shido or Windowware, there's nothing left to do but to play the game. Now we can set up our character. Each race has slightly different stats, but these only really matter for the first 25 levels or so. After that, the gear you'll get typically equals out the stats. If you're absolutely min-maxing, then you can choose a character based on their description. Galkas hit the hardest, but have the lowest mana. Mithras tend to dodge a lot. Tarus, which I'll be calling Tarus from now on, have the most MP, but lowest HP. Elvins will hit more often, and humans are kinda just average at everything, but I've seen plenty of Galkas be amazing and do just fine, so really just play whatever you think looks the best. It really doesn't matter. Each character has their own animations, and the females have unique music. You can also set up your hairstyle, height, and eventually a name. On Eden, I'm a male hume, and on Horizon, I'm a Mithra. So for this playthrough, I'll be a female hume. I wanted to play at Elvan, but good lord, look at those necks. For the name, I'll be Careful Woman. Unlike 14, you don't choose a first and last name, and you can't use another capital letter after the first. This is a bit restrictive, but whatever, I got the name I wanted. Next, you'll choose a starting job you'll want to play as. This can be changed at any time, so don't worry about being forced into one job. Lastly, you choose the server you're joining. I'll be on Ashura. It's the most populated, and there's some people that I want to meet up with. Once you pick a server, you can only transfer if you spend some money, so choose wisely. From here, you'll choose a starting nation. Which one you pick doesn't really matter much, though each nation does have their own unique missions in the base game story. The overall plot is the same, and as you level up more, you'll get more ways to teleport around the world itself, so it's mostly up to preference. Each starting town has its own side quests, so that might be a reason why you want to pick one over another, but you can do side quests from any nation you want. Now, Sandoria is the basic bitch choice, but it's simply the best one, so that's what I'll be going with. I configured my FPS wrong, so the starting text will be a bit sped up, but don't worry, I got you. But before we can start, I wanted to bring attention to this map I'll be using throughout the video, made by one Valetes from Reddit, though it seems his account has been suspended at the time of making this video. Throughout the video, I'll be showing this map when we go to new places, as a way to show how connected and really big the world is, as when you're just watching the video, the jump cuts may give the illusion that the world is much smaller than it really is. Now, we can start with the text scroll. The fortress city of Sandoria lies to the north on the great continent of Quan, the beating heart of an ancient kingdom. It is home to 1,000 legends past, but now her reign of glory is but a memory. Heroes raise shining sword to the heavens no more. The sun has set on the kingdom of night, an old lion never to rise again. Thus do some dismiss her now, yet young elven knights still venture proudly into the wilds of Vanadale, determined to triumph over any foes. On this particular day, there comes a new adventurer, ready to make a name for herself in Sandoria. The king wishes to bolster his ranks, and careful woman has journeyed far to answer the call. Should fortune favor her, bards across the lands will sing of her exploits for generations to come. Of course, she has only begun her rise to glory. No one can tell her what her future holds. Never before has she set foot within the elven capital, but she is resolved to let nothing stand in her way. Once that intro is over, we'll get an in-game cutscene, and some elvens will be talking to us. That'll be important later, so keep them in mind. But they mostly just tell us to not get in trouble, and to do our best for the nation before walking off. You'll notice how sort of cluttered the windows are in the bottom. We can split them up, and eventually we can also remove the yells from the public chat to remove some of the clutter. Well, what's a yell? It's a way to type in the global chat whatever you want. So if you're advertising selling goods, or hosting events, so on. You can only see them or send them when you're in town, but it can be obnoxious when it's going so fast. Once all that's been set aside, and changing just a few more game settings, we can finally begin our adventure into Vanadel. So, what are we doing now? Where are we? We're in Port Sandoria currently. Once going up some stairs, we'll be at the north part of the city. I found a Reddit post of someone hosting a link show for 75 cap. The max level in this game is 99, but it's optional to go that high. And an LS is basically a guild where you can meet and talk to other people in the same LS. Once going down to South Sandy, we can do a mini quest that teaches us the basics of the game, though I already know most of the stuff. It will teach us how to eat food, use the auction house, and some combat tips. The reason we do this is because it gives us an XP ring for free, which will increase our experience per kill, so grinding won't take as long. Though these only have a certain amount of charges, it can only be recharged once a week on a Sunday. Once done with that, we'll be in Ron Fair. There is a plot in the game, but we'll be skipping it for now. There's lots of enemies around, which obviously we must kill to gain experience. I mean, look at this thing, it's evil. Combat is pretty simple at the start, but it gets more in depth as the game goes on. Once targeting an enemy, you use the fight command to start auto-attacking it. Once your TP goes up, which is the green bar / number, you can do a special move at 1000. Alternatively, if you're a caster, you can cast spells on them instead of auto-attacking. Some people will say that this game is just a boring auto-battler, but I'd argue that just because the game doesn't make you press half the keys on a row of keyboard to do a simple rotation, it doesn't make it any less boring. For a little bit more of a complex way of explaining it, think of it like a active battle system from Final Fantasy 4 through 9. Each weapon, even your fist, has a delay. How long the delay is equal to how long it takes for you to actually attack somebody. At any point, you can use an ability, weapon skill, or cast a spell, but this will reset the delay. This also goes for ranged attacks, which has their own delay. Learning how to weave in your attacks along with your abilities is very important for late game battles. Once your HP is low, you have to manually heal yourself by resting or get healed by a healer. There are ways to give yourself HP regen and mana regen, but for the lower levels, those things are a lot harder to come by. Though if you get the Ultimate Edition, which is basically the only way to actually get the game now, you can get a beret, which gives you some HP regen and mana regen, along with some defenses that makes it easier to get kills early on. For now, we're just going to power level to level 11, but once we hit level 5, we're going to take a quick detour to learn about trusts. This is still a controversial change made to 11. The game was, and still is, co-op reliant. You can't always find all 6 people to fill a party, so Square Enix added the ability to make spawnable NPCs to join your party. What you can also do is just spawn 5 NPCs to fill the party instead. You can unlock different jobs for the trust, and story characters as you progress through the different stories. But for now, we'll just get X and Melee, a dragoon with no wyvern, and Cornelia, which doesn't seem to do much right now. This makes kills a lot faster, since it's basically 2 times the DPS. I quickly got to level 11, and decided to repeat this for the other 6 jobs. I'll talk more about the specific job differences later, since they mostly play the same in the early levels. Also important to note, if you get the Signet buff from a gate guard, and you get kills with it on you, you'll gain conquest points, which we use to buy some weapons, armor, and other stuff. After grinding a bunch of levels in Gil, I went around and finishing some low-level side quests. This will increase our reputation rank, letting us do more side quests. Each starting nation has their own reputation and quests to go along with it, which is separate from the nation's main storyline. After running around for an afternoon, I got a bunch of items and some good starting Gil. These aren't too important to talk about for now, except for one quest which I'll talk about much later in the video. I was able to get a sword, shield, some Gil, and a neck piece space for my worries, so that's not too bad. Once done running around, we'll go back to talk to a gate guard to get our first main quest. He basically tells us to kick rocks, unless we can prove that we aren't a Muppet. Easy enough. Now that we're level 11, I can easily kill the orc for an axe, or return back to the guard. Trading is kinda weird, since you have to go through an actual trade menu with the NPC to give them what they want, instead of it just being automatic. But that's easy enough. We learned the queen died from an illness, but nobody knows what the illness was, except for the royal family. We're then told that some people have been spotted looting some graves, and we should go check it out. One of the side quests I have also requires me to go to King Rampier's tomb, so I can finish 2 quests in one go. This place is a maze, and if we didn't power level, stronger enemies would start to aggro to us. The higher you are, the less monsters will try to aggro to you. We have to wait until a certain time until baths spawn, so we can get a drop to complete the main quest. Once getting it and going to a certain section, we'll get a cutscene. We learn of a missing sword, but not much else of note. I stayed over the endgame night to see if I can get a rare drop from a ghost, but it only spawns twice a night, so after only one try and failing to get it, I came back to Sandy to turn in the quest. We learned that the orcs have been starting to raid some of the tombs, which is pretty sus. The next quest will involve us saving a child, but first we have to learn about them. As well, the Temple Knights do want to help. They can't without any more info, so that's where we come in. The kid really isn't of importance. One of the church dudes tells us that he's a little guy who ran off all brave and stuff past the gates. Regardless, we'll eventually head to the orcs camp, which isn't too far from Sandy, and go to a hut to start a fight. The camp itself is basically split up into 3 parts, but we only really have to explore the first section. The fight itself is an instant fight, meaning that only people in the party can enter the fight against the 3 orcs, though they aren't too much of a problem. After beating the fight and being told that the orcs will get their revenge soon, trademark, Prince Trion will arrive to the scene. This isn't the first time we've seen him, as he was talking to us at the beginning of the game. While not the leader of Sandy, he has a lot of power along with his brother. Speaking of his brother, Trion says he's sorry about him not sending anybody sooner. He'll put in a good word for us for doing a good job, so that's some street cred for us. Once turning in the quest, we'll get 1000 gil and become rank 2 of Sandy. However, in order to get the next quest, we have to increase our rank points to the max. This can be done by trading in crystals to the gate guard, doing repeatable missions, turning in supplies to outposts, or just killing things with the Signa buff on. We'll just be trading in crystals, since it's the fastest way to do it, and we get bonus conquest points for turning in extra, which is always nice. One slight issue is that you have to be level 15 to start the next mission quest, so I'll get to level 20 to help with clearing them. Now would be a good time to go over the jobs you can play, since by level 20, you'll get more abilities. Warrior is a big damage dealer, DD for short, along with being pretty tanky. Monk is another DD, using fists instead of a 2-handed axe, and are a lot cheaper early on. They're not as tanky, tend to hit faster though. These have the ability to get a few more gil after a kill, and has access to Treasure Hunter, gives you a high chance of getting rare drops, so very important. Black Mage can cast magic to deal damage, can teleport people with their warp spells, and White Mages can heal / buff party members along with having different sets of teleports. Lastly, Red Mage is both a support and a DD, being able to cast both black and white magic, though not all of them. They get their own red magic as well, that are unique to them. There's a lot more jobs in the game, but we have to do quests / expansions to unlock them. So for now, we'll just stick to the basics. Before we can go level up more, we should upgrade our gear a bit, along with getting some more truss. And one of the layer expansions, you can do a handful of tutorial-esque things to get something called sparks, which you can turn in for gil or other items. And we'll start them now, after being informed from the LS about them. The tasks themselves aren't too interesting, I won't really be mentioning them in specific, but it'll give us bonus XP along with sparks, which is pretty good. It's mostly basic stuff like kill X amount of enemies, explore, deal certain damage, basically dailies. Once we got some capital from trading in massive amount of swords, we'll finally leave Sandy / Ronbear, start getting more experience by headed to the dreaded dunes, a place where boys become men in 11. We want to get to level 20 while being here ideally, so this is where I'll be getting my other jobs at 20 as well. Then I'll start to worry about getting more gear. During the grind, I figured out how to spawn different trusts. The grind to 20 became a lot easier with a tank and another DD. Here's an example of an ability for the thief. Top of treasure hunter, these have the ability to do good burst damage with sneak attack, and eventually they'll learn trick attack later on. This is called Sata for short, which changes enmity to a different person. Hate is another term for enmity, and I'll call enmity hate from now on. These have a lot of tools in later levels to change who the hate is on into. There's another reason why I picked the Dune to level up. It's because there's a quest in Salbina, which is a town nearby, that's very important, as it unlocks the sub job, which is basically the best part of the game. This is one of the main differences between 11 and 14. You can equip a second job, which is your main job level divided by 2, rounded down, assuming you have the levels for it. Then it'll be 75-37, and for level 50, it'll be 50-25, and so on. But what does any of this mean? Any stats or abilities you get from this sub-job will apply to your main job, so you can have a lot of mix and matching on different jobs for different situations. This is also the reason I've been power leveling multiple jobs at the same time. This makes sub-jobs a lot easier to mess around with, as I'll have the job levels for them immediately. The quest itself is pretty simple. You just have to turn in 3 different rare items, which can be found around the dunes from different enemies. I had someone from the LS help me with gathering the items, as the fights were a little bit too hard at my level. Once finishing that up, I'll be circling back to Sandy using a teleport book so we can continue with the main story. In the past, you would have to turn in outpost supplies, which was limited to one nation a week, being the most popular nation usually controlled the same spot over and over. Now any nation can activate a teleport book and can teleport wherever. But once I was back to Sandy, I was informed by the LS that it was better to start a few Rhapsodies of Vanadel missions, which is a later expansion, as it allows us to use more trust, which is helpful for leveling, on top of learning about spending login points from the campaign to buy some items. Shoutouts to Pipsqueak for gifting me some early game items in Gil, along with giving out a bunch of new info that I didn't know before, as retail is quite different from what I'm used to. There's a few cutscenes and a simple quest, and we meet some characters that come in later into the story, along with going to later parts of the game from an expansion, so I won't be showing any of this for spoilers. Eventually we'll get a key item, which gives us bonus XP, the ability to summon a 4th trust, cheaper teleports, and some more stuff. You might be wondering why I waited so long to unlock all this. It's because I'm just playing the game as is. I didn't look up a tutorial or anything, as it's pretty fun to just discover things on your own or with team help. Finally, once done with extra tasks that were not originally planned, we'll be going back to a gate guard to continue with our main story mission. There's a drill that we're told to go to, which is simple enough. We'll be going to Lethene Plateau, and once speaking to a captain there, we'll learn that there's a bit of a situation. A knight is currently lost, and tasks us to join the search. Once talking to some people down the ravine, we find the missing person hiding in a cave, but he refuses to come out unless he has a weapon to defeat the enemies himself. Otherwise, he'd be seen as a coward for accepting assistance. Once finding the sword from a random NPC from the ravine and returning it to the knight, we're told that the training was basically a failure, but we did save somebody technically, which gives us some more street cred for being brave enough to enter the cave alone, despite not really going that deep into said cave. Quickly returning to Sandy to turn in the quest, we'll soon start our next one, which will finally let us into the chateau, a place we were originally told we could never make it to by the gate guard, so we're actually moving up in the world. We're told that the beastmen are beginning to move further abroad, and it's our job to go to the other 2 nations in order to discuss the matter. It's also the first time we'll be going out of the general area of the starting town, since we've mostly only been to 3 other zones. Our first up will be going to Juno, which is a nation of quite importance. It's in the middle of the 3 other nations. The reason we're here is because there's a quest we can do to unlock a chocobo. This will speed up exploration by a fair bit. We'll need to get a license first before we can even ride one, which happens to be in Upper Juno. Juno itself is split up into 4 sections. I guess you can call it similar to Limsa. There's a small chocobo ranch here, and after talking to the head honcho, we learn that there's a chocobo that's currently afraid of people, so we have to prove that we won't hurt it by trying to feed them. The reason it's so afraid is because the last owner ended up abusing it, making it afraid of everybody, even going so far as to brand them themselves. Poor thing. Back in the day, you had to wait a whole in-game day, which is about 56 minutes to even feed it, but it's been changed to only be a minute in 2015. Once feeding it 4 times, we can prove that we're nice or something, and eventually we get our license. Now that we have a faster transportation, we can go on ahead and make our way to the different nations. I'll be going to Windrose first. To use a chocobo, you have to go to the station and pay a fee to rent it for 30 minutes, or until you dismount it. In this state, you can dig for items and monsters are unable to target you, making you pretty safe. Windy is more like a jungle, a lot more greens, tall trees and water, and is owned by the Tarus and co-owned by the Mithras. Once at the embassy, we're told that the nations nations of Windrust are trying to befriend the beasts, instead of exterminating them like Sandy. Though the Council of Sandy doesn't like it, they have a gift that we must trade over to the Tarus, and gives us the task to do it. One thing to learn about Wendy is that this place sucks. It's oversized and the layout is really confusing. Even though I've walked around here a bunch, I still get lost often, but we have to make our way to the Heavens Tower to turn in the gift, which is around the middle of Windrust. Once walking in, we will meet Lion, who is a very important character. She doesn't believe that the Yagudos are as nice as they claim to be, using the Taru's resources for themselves, with some interesting perspectives, but we have our own mission to worry about for now. Once giving the shield over, we're thanked, then told to turn around to do it again, but this time give the shield to the Yagudos. Yagudos themselves are bird-like. For some reason, in order to prove that we give them the shield, we must kill the people we're trying to make peace with to get 2 different shields. It's weird stuff, but it's easy enough. Once trading in the shield to a Yagudo higher up, we get told just to go away. So much for being grateful. Now we head back to the embassy to tell them that we did it, and we show the shield as proof. We don't really get more than a thanks, but now we have to travel to Bastok. Bastok is more rocky mountains, very low vegetation. It's certainly more dull than the other 2 places, and it's owned by the Humes, along with being co-owned by the Galkas. Once you're inside, it's definitely more machine-oriented compared to the other nations, along with having a few mines nearby. Once at the Bastok embassy, we're told that the mines have been lost to the Quadavs, a turtle-like monster, and that they might have a new leader, though it's just rumors. There's some slight racism with the Elvins against the Galkas, or at the very least, they don't really see eye to eye. We're then told by a higher-up of Bastok that they don't really trust Sandy, thinking that we're actually spies. But since we're kind of doing them a favor of entering the caves and checking things out, they'll let us slide for now, and that we should go talk to someone. Grom here tells us that in the past, Galkers were usually used for more dirty work, and that they've been trying to get the mines back for a while from the Quadavs, but gives us the clear to go check out the mines, or at the very least, is happy to send us to our deaths to go explore. Very generous of him. So off to the mines we go to check out a weird circle that Grom has mentioned to us. This place is also a bit of a maze, but eventually we get to the 3rd floor by taking the elevator. I tried rushing to the zone and dying for it, but I didn't end up recording it because I didn't think I would get aggroed so quick. But the hat gives us a free revive, so we're never truly punished. We're finally here. Similar to saving the child mission, we'll be in an instant fight for some more plot. We learn a lot from this. Once entering, we notice that there's a scary looking dragon that spawns in. Dragon is revealed to not be natural to this area, but the Northland, which is a place we'll know more about later. We also learn about a group called the Musketeers, which we'll also learn more about later. After that, we have a fight with Dragon in the floating ice, though it's not much of a challenge, and the fight ends pretty quickly. We soon learn after the fight that the new leader for the Quadav is more of a sergeant to the Shadow Lord, and while the 3 nations were busy not being nice to each other, they were able to grow an army as needed to start invading us. We'll have to report the news. First, we have to get out of here. Shoutouts to the Shin guy for helping me with the Warp 2, which is a black mage spell that warps us back to our home crystal, making it easier to teleport back to Bastok. Once we return to report, we get a few more not so nice words from the Elvins about being in a backwater place, or something like that. Then we're returned back to Sandy to turn in both reports. However, he's shocked at the reports, but also questions if they're actually true or not. The Shadow Lord died 20 years ago during the Great War. How can he possibly return? At the very least, we'll hit rank 3. Unfortunately, we'll have to once again power level our characters, as we need to be 35 to start the next few quests. That's honestly not too bad. One thing I've been keeping hidden until now is that the advanced job quest can start being done at level 30, so that's something to look forward to. Also, I'll finally take the time to properly gear up for the grind, since I've been using free stuff from quests from the beginning of the game, which are starting to become a bit too low level now. Once arriving to Port Juno, we're actually going to be going down some more stairs, putting us into the Quiffin Islands, a very cold and desolate place where war happened years ago. More on that much more later. And yeah, I know I keep saying later, but the game has a lot of lore. I don't want to just info dump the whole video, but once down here, we'll find a nice comfy coast to chill out to do our next PT. Clippers are very weak to thunder spells, so despite them being quite hard to kill normally with their bulk, I can make quick work of them as a black mage or red mage. If you had a party of 5 or 6 black mages, you could do this at a lower level and still kill them for insanely fast experience. But this won't last forever, since the thunder spell is at level 21, meaning my main job will have to be 42 to use it on jobs that are not black mage, so leveling my melee jobs will be a bit slower when fighting the clippers, but we'll still get the job done. The pugils that are around here are also easy to kill, even though they give less experience overall. They're not as tanky as the pugils, so I'll mix those in as well for experience. While still talking about the enemies, mechanic I haven't properly addressed is actually XP chaining, and it works like this. The faster you kill enemies in succession, the more experience you get. Since we're a lot stronger, we can actually start doing this with the pugils. For example, let's leave a clipper as the last chain due to them being harder to kill as a melee. This results in getting more experience compared to the pugils due to the massive bonus that we'll get at the end of the chain. Probably wondering why I still have the same gear on from the previous kind. They give massive buffs until 31, so big that the stat increase I get from other gear isn't really worthwhile. The shirt I had to pay $10 for gives insanely high accuracy for range, magic, and melee. And the beret, which was also $10, gets movement speed, mana, and HP regen, which makes getting into fights a lot easier. Once past 31, you'll start seeing me in different gear, as the effect is no longer applied. Speaking of levels, every 10 levels we gain an ability or a job trait. Some examples is that we get the flee ability on Thief, letting us temporarily increase our movement speed. For warriors, you can gain a temporary damage increase for a defense decrease. Mages learn spell from scrolls at certain levels. The scrolls you can either buy or find as a drop. You might be wondering why I keep leveling all my jobs at the same time, because sub job is main job divided by 2, so at 75 you want to have sub jobs at 37. So this is more of a way to get all the jobs to a minimum of 37. Then if I decide if I like the job enough to keep playing it, then it's basically halfway to 75. So it's kind of just a win-win. And just like that, we dink to 30 on the final job, and we can move on to the next spot. While we only need to be level 35 to start the next quest, I want to hit 40 first, as a lot of the quests after the next one requires you to be at that level. I wasn't actually sure where I wanted to go at first, but I decided to go to Bibiki Bay, a place on the coast by Windy. Even though it was faster to take a warp to Windy and taking a chocobo ride there, I wanted to take it easy, and a good way to do that by taking the boat ride from Selbina. To take the boat, you have to pay a small fare and have to on the boat's arrival. We actually just missed the boat, so we gotta wait a bit for it to return. What's pretty cool about the boat ride is that you can see different zones that you can go to, and while it is from a far distance and the models are pretty low detailed, you can actually pick out different land masses from the world map if you know them. This gives the world a true lived in place feeling, instead of just giving a cutscene that warps us to where we have to go. You can also fish on the boat if you're so inclined, but monsters do appear on the top side of the ship, so if you're low level, then it's a lot better to stay at the lower deck. Once the boat finishes docking, we'll be at Mahura, and it's not too much of a walk to go to Bibiki Bay. Bibiki Bay has a boat ride to a far off island with its own unique route, and while the island is quite the place to be, it is definitely for a different time. But outside of a very long alley with some high level monsters and a few shops, there's not too much more to note about Bibiki Bay. It didn't take a long time for me to get the levels here, as the Fs aren't too much trouble to deal with, though the large giraffes have an ability to heal themselves and can do a massive AoE attack, so I try not to fight them too much, but the grind here is only until 37. Once done here, we'll go to a place I'm sure some of you guys have been eagerly awaiting to see. In order to get the last 3 levels, we'll be going to the most famous zone of the whole game, the Sanctuary of Zeta, or at the very least, a lot of Final Fantasy fans know about. Though this was added in a later expansion, along with Bibiki Bay, and I try to stick to a plan where I didn't use too many zones from expansions, the places in the base game that grind are a lot more limited and are generally not as good as the later zones added, so I broke some rules to make this process go a bit faster. Zeta itself is a beautiful place, dense with massive trees and a low light setting, and while the monsters are quite dangerous, it's a great place to keep leveling up. A big thing to worry about is linking. Monsters have a few different ways they can aggro. Some do by sight, and if you're not invisible or get too close, they'll start to follow you. Some are by sound, which is basically the same thing, though even if you don't move, it'll still aggro to you. Lastly, it can be passive, but if a monster is fighting it, but once a monster is fighting you, and they get too close to the fight, then they'll link and start attacking you as well. Spacing your fights is a very important thing, as monsters don't de-aggro, unless you're a thief, which has the ability to temporarily cloak themselves, removing all of your hate. Though if you're the only person around, it will just re-aggro. To get rid of a monster's aggro, we must zone it or kill it. Once leveling to level 40, we'll make our way back to Sandy to continue with the story quest. We'll turn in some more crystals to start our next mission. We're told that one of the two princes, Prince Treon, wants to see us. That's pretty exciting. It's not often that you get called personally by a prince. He told us that because of the Shadow Lord's potential arrival, they want us to go to Devoy, a place which was once owned by Sandy, but was lost in the Great War to the Orcs. His brother, Puget, has already sent another team earlier, but they haven't returned, so now we're being added to the mission to figure out what happened to the last team, along with scoping out the area for any more info. Once zoning into Devoy, we'll get a cutscene about Rock Fawn still looking for a sword, and that their sister may know more, before taking his leave. Yet we also find Centaviet, a scout who only watches the area, hiding behind a tree. This will be the first of many times that we'll be using the spells both Invisible and Sneak. As said earlier, this allows us to not be seen by higher level monsters, so we can explore areas a bit sooner than we're supposed to. We'll be walking around for a bit until we find someone by a bridge, telling us that there are a few knights that are currently stuck deep in Devoy, and we have to hand in the report they made to the higher-ups, or else they'll greatly lack some critical information. Apparently, despite being lost for several days, he can find his way on his own. Once returning and handing in the report, Treon seeks help from the Temple Knight and then leaves us. Quickly getting the next mission, we learn that there's currently a break-in in the chateau. Once entering to see for ourselves, we learn that two Elvans went in to steal something from the Queen's chamber, but the Queen herself has been dead for many years, and while her room was the same as it was before her death, there was little to take but some jewelry. Perhaps the Queen is the sister of Rock Fawn? Going to the gardens, we learn that the mother's diary was misplaced and that thieves are still on the loose. One of the thieves was in blue armor, and the garden keeper may have seen them before. There's not much more to say about this, so we'll start the next quest. We're learning that we are to become an attaché of Sandy to Juno, but first we should talk to Howard about some more info. Howard tells us that we'll be getting our papers from Destin, the king of Sandy himself. The king gives us high praise for the great work we've been doing for the nation, and now that we have the letter, we can go to Juno. Up at the very top of Juno is Rulud Garden, placed so high that we are above the crowds. Above the clouds. We'll soon find out that the ambassador of Sandy is currently not available at the moment, as they left to investigate somewhere, and that they may not be feeling well. According to us Elven here, top of that, a knight named Wolfgang seems to be non-trustworthy of us, or at the very least, doesn't think an adventurer is a good fit for the embassy. Whatever the case is, we have to head down to Quiffin Islands to enter the difficult tower to find them ourselves. There's 10 floors here to go up, and it's a bit of a maze, as you have to take specific teleporters around the area. It's not just 10 flights of stairs. While we're pretty high level, monsters close to the top will start to aggro to us, so it's back to sneak/invis. Once climbing to the top, there's a notorious monster, or NM for short, blocking the door, so we couldn't just sneak in like I originally wanted to. NMs are strong monsters in the zone, sometimes drop good gear, or they're just there to look cool. Thankfully the fight itself was rather easy, and no other monsters linked. Our next steps is to get a key from a boss, which also isn't much trouble. This unlocks an elevator, and once going down the elevator, we get the pleasure of walking down a whole bunch of stairs to reach the very bottom. This is very fun. Once there, we meet Jima, who got caught off guard during her investigation and got knocked out. Thankfully is still fine. Tells us to return back to the embassy. Once there, we get a thank you and become the official attaché of the Embassy of Juno. Now you can't really say this happens too often. This time, the next quest will actually be handed out by the receptionist of the embassy instead of a gate guard, and we are to have a chat with the Archduke of Juno himself, basically the main guy. Camlunut here wants us to find a few different items for him in some dangerous places, called Magicite, as these stones have incredible power and are apparently giving the beastmen the power to be as strong as they are. The 3 areas we're going to be at are the most dangerous places we've been so far. Before leaving, we're also given a letter to go to somebody named Aldo in a group called the Tashendo, as their abilities can help us on our mission. The Tashendo is a secret group stationed somewhere in Juno, so we have to go find them first. However, there's a slight problem. In order to enter the Tashendo, we have to do a quest to unlock a pass to be allowed entry, or you can just go buy one from the auction house. It's kind of weird to have a membership system that you can just buy off of somebody, but whatever. Once talking to Aldo, he hands us an item which will help us get the Magicite, but will get interrupted during our conversation from a woman named Mirana. She's worried about the Archduke's last decree. He wants all of the Beastmen and Juno to be forced out, which Verana does not agree with, instead getting pale as she tries to figure out what to do about it, as she has befriended a goblin. There's some shops around Juno that are all ran by goblins as well, so just getting rid of all of them seems like a bad decision. For now, we'll just leave Juno to get the Magicite items required. Since I've done this quest a few times already, I know that you can metagame it hard if you have someone to help you. There's a black mage spell called Tractor, which will pull a dead body closer to them. This will ignore terrain, and important for our case, the walls. There's also an item called the Poison Potion, which will poison you and eventually kill you if you don't have the HP. So here's the plan. Once getting low from a monster, I'll chug a Poison Potion to bring my HP to 0, get pulled in by Tractor, then get revived. Now, I will lose some experience doing this, which is unfortunate, but the skip's probably 15 minutes in each zone from running around in each area, solving puzzles, and probably dying in the process. Massive shoutouts to the LS for helping me out, but I am getting ahead of myself. There's a handful of cutscenes to go over first. The first item that we need is a torch to supposedly help us see in the dark. To get it, we'll have to talk to some kids trying to grow a plant. The Calca doesn't think it'll grow and is a bit mean about it, but the Taro seems optimistic. Flicky is just happy to have people talk to him, even if the plant doesn't grow. It is quite touching. Next, we'll go down to Lower Juno to Muchfix, one of the goblins at the goblin shop. We learn that Flicky wants to try and calm down the Beastmen as they're starting to act restless, though he thinks that it's a waste of time. The Beastmen from the past generation didn't forget about the war between the Beastmen and the people of Vanadel, but the kids barely know about it, so perhaps they'll be the one to help bridge the gap. After a sad and deep talk, we'll get the special torch required to start exploring. First, we'll be going to Biadu. After realizing Tractor doesn't work if you have a re-raise option on first, and having Dreadwood warp back with the caster to actually revive me, we can go through the door. Once touching the Magicite, we'll learn a bit about the past, and this will happen to the 2 other stones. We learned that in the past, we blew up a bunch of caves and temples to excavate the place in an attempt to find treasures and materials. This was led by a person named Ulrich, who will be very important into the story. Ulrich here is not really caring about the monsters that they were hurting in the process. Ragarim is very sympathetic to the monsters and becomes sad or upset that Ulrich doesn't try to sympathize with them. Sometime later, Ulrich nearly kills Ragarim, presumably because they try to fight back against Ulrich about his uncaring for the monsters, but Cornelia took the blow instead, leaving Ulrich to run from the scene. Her last words being that he was still needed by people. It's kinda heavy stuff. Once leaving Biadu, we'll head to Castle Astroja next, which is a place that's controlled by the Yagudos. Once getting revived and walking through the doors, we get a cutscene involving Flix. Because of our Tractor abuse, we've actually skipped some cutscenes. It's mostly about us learning that Flix is trying to go to the major places where the Beastmen live to try to reason with them. However, the only cutscene that we'll actually see with him is us seeing that he ends up dying. From what? We don't know. And also, somehow Verana is here, but she tells us to not only look at what we see in front of us and to care about others before walking away from the scene, escaping somehow. Soon after touching the next Magicite, we get another cutscene, talking about the Windrose Pass this time. Something happened after the Great War, which brings us here. So in the past, the Taros blamed the Yagudos for the downfall of the lands around them, like the Merifatud Mountains for example. A tower and ruins were made in the past, and the Taros activated them for their power, removing energy from the lands around them. Even though the towers aren't used anymore, the energy never returned. They hint that it was the Taros' fault for this as well, but the cutscene ends before we're told why. Now that we got the stone from here, we'll have to go to the void for the last item on the list. We learn a lot from here as well. There was a few others in the expedition, and Elvin was ordered to go to the Northlands to follow the group as an investigation of the other nations, as the leader of Sandy didn't trust them. And during said investigation, after Ulrich ran off after stabbing Cornelia and pretending that Ragarim and Cornelia fell off to their deaths, even though the Elven had a feeling he was lying, he let it go as he didn't seem to care too much. After returning and submitting their report, Franz Mage came by the dungeon after a restless night, but something kills him off screen. Perhaps a spy? Once the flashback is done, we see an aspiration of the Shadow Lord, telling us that we are doomed before Movie Maker dissolving away. We go back to Juno to inform Archduke about what happened, along with giving them the Magicite stones. We get told that thanks, and learn that there's actually a 4th Magicite crystal somewhere else, but he doesn't know where. And as a thanks, he gives us an airship pass, letting us use the airship to the 3 nations. At this point, we can just teleport wherever, so it's kinda redundant. Even in private servers without home crystal teleports, it's usually faster to not take it. But on other important news, we're told that the 3 nations are being attacked by the Beastmen. Before heading out, Earl shows us some of his powers to read minds, telepath. It's not exactly clear, but he requests to see Verana, since she can, quote, talk to the Beastmen, leaving us a bit confused as we quickly hurry back to the embassy to report back on the issues. We're not given too much time to relax as we're told to go back to our hometown. Once arriving back to the chateau, we learn, however, someone over-exaggerated the story, claiming it was an assassination attempt on the king to rally up the troops, but the bandit problem has been dealt with once arriving. We learn that they have escaped with a talisman. It's said that the talisman was used to seal the Shadow Lord away, each nation having their own talisman, though it's not that only the royal family would have known about, along with knowing the exact location in the chateau of where it was hidden, making the raid on the chateau more of a decoy while they sneaked away with it. Walking back to the gate guard, we get our next mission. We just get told to go back to the chateau, despite the fact that we just came out of there to go speak with Halver. Once talking to Halver once again, he tells us some very important lore, so important that it'll be brought back up for the next few expansions. The short of it is that we'll be heading to the Northlands to a place called Fayen. The Northlands are ruins from the Great War, and the ruins themselves were part of an ancient civilization called the Zillart, with Fayen and another place called Cape Terrigan having left intact since the war, perhaps by magic. We're tasked to go there to scope out the area and to find out more information. While the Shadow Lord may return, if the border that was once made becomes broken, then all of Vanadel will be lost. So we certainly have our work cut out for us. Going through West Ronfair, we head to the Ragomon Pass, a place we couldn't go past because we lacked the strength to do it. Now we do. They give us a warning before letting us through and locking the door behind us. After walking through a bunch of tight caves, we end up outside to a pretty cool place. This is where we'll be spending a lot of our time for the next few missions. Once again, sneak/invis makes exploring way safer. This is one of the biggest and worst zones to walk through in the base game, since you have to make so many backtracks to stay on the correct path. Eventually, we get past the Busadine Glacier to enter Fayen. We bump into Lion again, along with a Galka named Zeed. He lets out that all of the people in the expedition ended up dying a violent death after their return. Perhaps this is related to the killing of Franzmaj in the cellars. While this place is a maze, it isn't too bad if you know that you can basically take a straight line from one end to the other. Though there is not a warp available until the end of it, dying here would be a real pain. From here, we'll be entering a BCNM fight against some skeleton dudes. He spawns an infinite amount of ads during the fight, which makes the strat to just focus the main boss. We were pretty close the first time, but I couldn't do the last bit of damage, so I tried to switch it up as a black mage instead, since the boss is actually weak to fire. Unfortunately, my trust fell asleep almost immediately and I died shortly after my second attempt. One thing to note is that you can wake people up with a cure spell, but you can have your cast cancelled if you're hit, so I was just dead man mode regardless. Third time's the charm, but it was mostly Valis spamming his AoE more than last time, as me doing fire damage to the boss did very little overall DPS, to the point where it was basically a net negative in terms of damage. Once the fight is over, Zeed will come talk to us. Zeed explains to us that the seals that were meant to keep the Shadow Lord are now broken, and the seal that we were given by Halver will do nothing now. He doesn't believe the Shadow Lord will actually return, but just maybe. Either way, we must return to Halver to tell the news. We're sort of at a crossroad, where Trion wants to start an attack first before the Shadow Lord may return, but diplomatically, they can't do such things without consulting the other nations first, which upsets Trion. We can see an additional cutscene by entering his room, where he repeats the same thing, being upset that the council is too afraid to take action despite the impending doom. We're actually going to take a detour, as I want to start unlocking advanced shops before I finish the base game, and the next final quest for the base game requires us to be at level 50 to even start it, which was the main level cap at launch. Job quests have a main-ish story connection, sometimes. One thing you've probably noticed by now is that a lot of the story isn't really told to us. Outside of what's happening directly in front of us, it's instead fragmented into different quests, both side and main quests, along with expansions. This makes learning about the story both somewhat challenging and very rewarding, as you start learning about a lot of smaller details and why the world is the way it is, which is super cool. This is very different from 14, where you just do 100 million main story quests and where the last 30 missions actually matter. From the base game lineup, we can unlock Paladin, who's a tank with the highest shield rating, Dark Knight, which is a very high DPS, along with casting some spells, Beastmaster, which originally was meant as a way for people to play by themselves, but now that the trust in the game, this is sort of redundant. Though that's not to say that the pet that they can spawn is weak. Far from it. Bard, which is a job that buffs players, which is very important for a lot of partying. Ranger, which is a dedicated range DPS, and Summoner, a magic user that can summon different avatars to fight or buff. I'll go quickly and unlock Paladin, Ranger, and Dark Knight. I won't be leveling them yet, as I already have a lot of leveling to do in this video, but I want to keep those options available for a later time. Starting with Paladin, one of the side quests that we did at the beginning of the game involved a boy losing his father, and him being scolded after they reunite. Now that we're at level 30, we can start the actual questline. There's an old Elvan in Sandy that will teach us the ways of the shield. He tasks us to go to a cave to collect some water and return. It's a very dangerous place, so he sends us over there to prove that we aren't chickens. Luckily, we already have a warp from the drill rescue quest, so it's a quick tell you there. We'll have to go to the depths of the cave, certainly far from a safe place. Thankfully, we're a high enough level that the monsters will leave us alone. This small pond in the cave is quite a beautiful sight, but once getting the key item, we can head back to turn it in. He congratulates us and gives us our next quest. He'll give us a book and tell us to figure it out since we're so smart. And that's about it. Not very helpful, but that's what the wiki is for. We have to talk to 2 different NPCs that give us even more books once talking to them. The average Yu-Gi-Oh player can't read, so it makes you think I'm any different. Once getting both books, we'll be going back to Devoy to look for a hidden item in a well. Sandy tends to go to Devoy a lot in quests, and will definitely do it for the later Paladin quests. Once returning with the items, we get some congrats and can now become a Paladin. We're also given a kite shield for our troubles, though we need to be level 30 to even use it, so it's not that much of a gift. Up until this point, I haven't really talked about shields. They are different. Shields are split up into tiers, tier 1 through 4. The lower the tier, the higher the block chance, but the less damage it blocks, and the higher it is, the opposite. People usually default to Kite Shield as a good medium between the two. There is a 5th tier, but that's not for another expansion. Now that that is out of the way, we're gonna go unlock the Ranger next. Thankfully, there's no quest chain required to unlock Ranger, or Dark Knight for that matter. To unlock Ranger, we have to head to Windrust and talk to a chieftain, Para. We're told by Para that if you want to become Rangers, we have to go to an animal and bring back their tooth. Quickly going over to Sarah Moon's Champagne, we enter a hidden cave and touch some bones to activate the encounter. However, we don't actually have to fight the tiger, as it will die on its own, but we're not allowed to actually hurt it either, so we'll just have to wait and watch it walk around. Once it dies, we get a key item by looting the body. It can return back to Para, who tells us something about living and dying by the fang, similar to a tiger, and gives us the ability to become a ranger. I'm not sure if those two things are related to each other, but sure. Lastly, we'll go unlock Dark Knight, which is in Bastok. After getting a cutscene from a kid Galka named Gumba, we learn about the past a little. Zed was a leader of a group called the Mithril Musketeers. After Rangarim disappeared from the expedition, but has since vanished at some point. We also learn that Zed created a branch of a Dark Knight, and is told that the only way to become one is to be an angsty teen from the 2000s. We're given a hint to check out the mines, which we do. We take a boat ride into a second part of the caves, which we haven't really explored much, so there's not really much to explore. We'll talk to Zed for a moment, saying he would like to visit Bastok again after not going for so many years. It's probably for the best that he doesn't. He gives us a sword, saying that if we want to become a Dark Knight, it'll be a hopeless road where anger and sorrow are your only companions. Some real edgy stuff. What we have to do next is quite tedious. We need to get 100 kills with the sword on any enemy, which can include level 1 enemies. The last hidden mechanic I'll talk about for this video is skill rating. I didn't really have to use this mechanic yet, as trusts tend to do enough damage that you can use whatever. Most jobs can use most things, but each job has a weapon proficiency rating on said weapon. So while Dark Knights can use great swords, they can also use a great axe and a scythe. Warriors can use just about everything, which makes them flexible, so we'll be using them. But technically a paladin can also use a greatsword, but the weapon will have either better or worse accuracy depending on the job, and it can cap how many levels you can get on the job. The more levels you gain, the more weapon skills you can use, and the more accuracy you'll get. Different weapons have different weapon skills, and different skill chain potential on top of that. This is where some of the depth of 11 lies in. For now, I'll just jump cut to me completing all the kills. What's really annoying is that there's no counter, so we have to keep track of the kills ourselves. I could have used Paladin to level both Paladin and get the kills for the quest, but because of the lower hit rating on Paladin, it would have been a lot faster as Warrior. Once getting the kills, we'll have to meet up with Zed. We'll be zoning into BDU to get a cutscene. Zed tells us that we're edgy enough to kill the souls of our enemies or something, not really important, but before leaving, he tells us that we may cross him again. Now that all of that is done, we'll go grind the jobs to level 50 real quick. We'll be going down to the worst place on Benadel, Garterlage Citadel, or as I've affectionately heard it as, the garbage compactor. Our main targets are going to be some bats, which is quite unfortunate as you hear some high-pitched squeals from them dodging often. The kills themselves won't take too long if we actually hit, but that's not guaranteed. There's a few beetles that will mix in as well, which don't dodge much, but are extremely tanky. So really, there's no winning with this place. But eventually, we'll get 47 in all of our jobs, and have to move out as the experience was starting to slow down too much to get to level 50 at a reasonable rate. This will take us to the last place that we'll grind in this video. Once entering the chateau and going down some stairs to an underground prison, this will take us to our last place to grind in this video. We've actually seen this before in the Magicite cutscene, but this isn't where we'll be going. Even further down, there's an old sewer system called Boustany Oubliette that will be partying for a while. Some cool lore is that in the past, people accused of treason to the Sandy Nation would be thrown down here, presumably to rot away. Now high-level monsters stay here, and the army kinda just ignores this place. Some real scary stuff. Thankfully, there's a teleport book nearby, so we can warp back here whenever we need to. Annoyingly, the monsters that we'll be killing are bats again, some are missing for the next few hours. There are some hounds that we can sometimes kill, but they are really strong, and have some abilities to poison us or even stun us. I tried to avoid them as the experience wasn't worth a potential death. This is also the first camp where I actually had real competition, as every camp that we went to before was empty. There was a few times that I had to wait and come back another time to start experiencing due to this, which is a little annoying, but what's 11 without people competing to get stuff? After dinging to our last job at 50, we can accept the next quest from the gate guard. There are more quests to do in the Sandy storyline, but this will be the last one for now, as the other quests require both higher levels and further expansion packs, so we'll just keep it simple for this video. We're told Prince Trian wants to see us personally, so we head to the chateau immediately. Albert tells us that no decision has been made from the other nations, and Trian is very upset about it, and he requests that we go talk to him. In a short cutscene, Trian tells us what Albert just did, but gives us an order to go stop the plant of the Shadow Lord himself, as if we continue to wait, then all will be lost, even assuming all responsibility for the mission. Well, there's no time like the present, so let's head on over to the cupboard. I tried to come as a thief, as Flea would have made running around the map a lot easier, but I ended up dropping while getting to the outpost teleport, so I ended up switching to White Maid. I did get the teleport before dying, so it's not too long before I warp back. Once getting close to our goal, we can see that this is the same place from the cutscene where Cornelia died to Ulrich. They were quite close to the castle before turning around. The atmosphere was heightened because of the weather. That's purely random what weather is in what region. The lights look really cool too, juxtaposing the spookiness of the area with something beautiful. Castles of Fall is a very dangerous area, and it's very easy to get lost here. Everything aggroes, even at 75, some mobs can aggro you if you go to the wrong area. Despite walking through here plenty of times, I still sometimes have to pull out the map to navigate the area properly. There is thankfully a teleport at the very end. Just to even get into the castle itself, we have to go through a secret entrance, as the main gate is closed. This place killed me a few times, as this place was not made with soloing in mind. There's so little room to move around, and in order to progress, it requires lots of doors to be opened, but you can't do that while you're invisible, and of course conveniently, there are enemies placed around the door, so you can't just sneak in without a lot of luck. My outlets came in clutch once again, as somebody was able to open the doors for me, so that I can stay invisible the whole way through. Once thanking them, and buying myself some new gear from Monk, including some minus enmity gear, so I'll decrease my chances of being clapped by the Shadow Lord, or finally at his doorstep. Once walking in, we get a cutscene. Zed comes in for some reason, but he reveals that he was the one that defeated the Shadow Lord years ago. We then learn that the Shadow Lord was a Gauka, one that fell because of a traitor. Ulrich was jealous of them for being a beastman lover and a better swordsman. He became so angry that he didn't die, and now became this. At this point, he's so angry that he now wants to kill everybody before he implodes from all the anger built up. We get booted out, and once we enter again, we'll start the fight. The fight itself isn't too complicated. He has some strong single target attacks and some strong magic attacks. Once his HP goes to about half, his main mechanic comes in. He'll turn immune to an attack type for 5 minutes or until taking 1000 damage, and then he'll switch to the next damage type that he'll be immune to, and this will repeat until his HP becomes 0. I completely forgot about this mechanic, so I ended up doing 0 damage for 5 minutes and leaving the fight due to a lack of magic attacks. Monks do have access to Chi Blast, but it's on a 3-minute cooldown, so it wasn't worth the wait. I ended up switching to Black Mage for this fight because of this. As while I did have a Scholar as a trust, I locked any other with magic attacks. This time, the fight went a bit smoother, though Black Mages without decent gear tend to do worse overall damage than a physical damage dealer with not so good gear. But I was able to slowly take down the first phase. Once dying, phase 2 will happen, where he will roleplay the Cloud of Darkness from Final Fantasy III and will only spam a massive AoE attack that hits everybody, no matter how far you are. There's no time to rest during this phase, so it was a bit close, but there's no real strategy to this. We'll just burst on the Shadow Lord at this point until his HP goes to 0 again. The music here is amazing. It's not too in your face with loud music, but it's still very fitting. Though the fight itself isn't the most exciting, he'll eventually go down a second time. Seed drops a fat bomb that Ragarim was the Shadow Lord, though it was pretty obvious if you were paying a little bit of attention. A ghost of Cornelia appears, which seems to help awake Ragarim out of his trance. We learn that Ragarim was a Tailkeeper, but after hearing so many stories of strife from the history of how Gaukas have been treated, on top of the betrayal of Ulrich, he let the darkness consume him. Lion appears randomly as well, telling us to escape as Ragarim starts to self-implode. The true Ragarim has already died 30 years ago, and this was just an empty shell of hatred that he wished to leave. He says that he's happy to be with Cornelia again before we escape. We get the classic prelude song, along with text crawl about the light and darkness, and how the warriors of the crystal has risen. Once outside the throne room, Lion hints to our next location, requiring an airship pass to a place called Norg, but that won't be for another expansion. Then we're let off on our own. Now we have to go back to Halber to turn in the final quest. It's somewhat anticlimactic, as we don't even get a party for stopping the end of the world. Instead, we get a pat on the back for doing a great job for the nation, go up to rank 6, and get told that we should never rest. It's our job to protect Vanadel. If you remember from way in the beginning of the video, I said that each nation has their own unique missions. I plan to do those in this video, but due to the length, I decided to split it up into an addendum video. It shouldn't take too long to come out, as no level grinding is required at this point, and I have all the teleports to make things go a lot faster. I personally haven't done any of the other nation missions, as I've only really stuck to Sandy for the main storyline, but you can do side quests for any nation, regardless of your hometown, but you do have to switch nations to start the next storyline. So with that being said, thanks for sticking around to the end, and I hope you have a good day.